Do you know what your most important activities and most important drivers are for your business? And even if you do, does everyone else on the team know? As leaders, if we want to create the most value in our organizations, we have to have clear answers to those questions. And that's our focus today. Getting that clarity and using it to create better results, the results that matter most. Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively, make a bigger difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. That's why we're here. I'm assuming that's why you're here. If you're listening to this podcast, you could have been with us live, or in the future, you could be with us live, because all of these episodes are first live streamed on a variety of social media platforms. You can find out when that's happening so you can get this information sooner. In this case, about a month sooner, the live versus when it will be on the podcast. If you want to learn how to do that, you can join our groups at either Facebook or LinkedIn. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to do exactly that. Today's episode is brought to you by our Remarkable Masterclasses. Pick from 13 important life and leadership skills to help you become more effective, productive, and confident while overcoming some of your toughest challenges as a leader. Learn more and sign up at remarkablemasterclass.com. Our guest today is Lee Benson. I'm going to bring him up now so you can see him. And as Lee smiles at you, I'm going to tell you all about him. Lee Benson is a value creation expert with over 30 years of experience in the business world. He is the CEO of Execute to Win, a firm that helps organizations of all sizes accelerate the value they create. Lee began his value creation journey early, pulling weeds for 25 cents an hour. Since then, he has founded and led 7 companies, including Able Aerospace, which he grew from 2 employees to 500 employees and 2,000 customers in 60 countries, and exited that business in 2016. He is a sought-after speaker and author of the new book, Your Most Important Number: Increase Collaboration, Achieve Strategy, Your Strategy, and Execute to Win. He's been featured in publications such as the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and Inc. Has been interviewed on CNBC and Bloomberg and other major media outlets, including now today on the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Lee, welcome. So glad that you're here, sir.
Kevin, great to be here. Thank you.
I want to start kind of the way, I pretty much always, Lee, open with some sort of an introduction of the person. We got a little bit of a sketch of your journey, but I really want you to say a little bit more about your journey. I like to sometimes say to people, when you were 10, you didn't figure you'd be doing what you're doing now. At least probably not exactly. So just give us a little bit of what leads you to in this space. Obviously, you've done a lot of different things. Why this work? Why this work now?
Yeah, it's quite a journey. That's a giant question. But I love talking about starting out. My first experience trading my best efforts for the accumulated best efforts of somebody else, and that was pulling weeds, and then it was shoveling snow and paper outs and dishwasher, busboy, cook. In the 1980s, I played in rock and roll bands, easily over 1,000 nights and clubs and concerts. That's how I made most of my money back then. That was kind of like a business, although I don't really count it as a business. Of the 7 that I've started from scratch myself and controlled, and I just actually starting an 8th company this month with a couple of my friends. First one that I don't have controlling ownership, but it's a 3-way equal partnership. And I just love this. I love this whole value creation journey, and I've been working for decades now on this framework that I call holistic value creation. So it's 3 macro buckets. It's material value creation, which most people fully get that. Hey, it's the money, and it's super important to cultivate that. Also, maybe even more importantly, emotional energy value creation, which I look at as the scarcest commodity on the planet. When our emotional energy is on 10, we can do anything. When it's on 1, you get a flat tire and it ruins your week. And then third, the spiritual value creation bucket, which I look at as connectedness, to ourselves, to our friends, our families. In the context of an organization, it's all the other team members we work with, our suppliers, our customers, and strengthening that. And so I feel like every day I'm on the front lines in this laboratory to promote holistic value creation behaviors out in the world, through the work I do directly with clients, that my team does with clients. I run groups of CEOs in my what I call execute mastermind groups. And it's all about that is accelerating the value of their organizations through holistic value creation.
So it's interesting that you ended there, because that's where I wanted to go next. Is you
Yeah.
used this phrase? I used it in the intro, and you used it like 7 times already. You said that you're an expert at value creation. So let's just start there. Let's start with what you. I mean, you've talked about three different types of it just now. Was there anything more you want to say about what you specifically mean by creating value? First, let's do that first.
Yeah, creating value in the world. I believe it feels right when it's holistic. And, most people, again, think about the material piece of it. There's a lot of virtue signaling going on in the world saying, hey, it can't be just about the money and it's all this other stuff. But when you look at most people's behaviors and actions and decisions, it's 90% around the money. And what I'm advocating for in this framework is that it's really important to keep it in balance, and that balance is going to be different for each individual, each organization. But the emotional energy value created, which is a superpower for leaders, they're conveying that they're creating this energetic environment where every team member is sort of intrinsically motivated and empowered to create more value over time. So really important to get that right. And then on the connectedness side, what are we doing to strengthen the communities it within our organizations? It's always interesting to me that companies have to do a survey to figure out what's going on. Like if you don't know, like what's up with that? Even the surveys, the Gallup 12 question survey, which I'm sure you're familiar with. One of the questions on there is, do you have a best friend at work? If it came back and it said, hey, we don't have very many best friends made at work, what do we start a best friends program? It's like, it's so crazy to me. And I think it's because they're primarily focusing on cultivating material value creation, which is super important. But when they don't cultivate the other two, it diminishes the potential of the material value creation. And one thing I'd like to say, because you use the word expert, and one thing I hope for myself and almost everybody I know and care about is that they never become experts, because most experts I run into these days, they stop learning, and more importantly, they stop listening. And when I look at your book, Remarkable Leadership, and you talk about unleashing, potential and 13 competencies in there, you're starting with learn continuously, right? And so that's like, you have to be on the front line learning. And a lot of the experts go on the speaking tour and they couldn't do the thing they're talking about to save themselves. And so I think we all need to keep learning. That's the first thing in your book and foundational to me. And that's why I'm on the front lines with my clients and companies I'm invested in every single day.
So the title of the book is Your Most Important Number. And so let's just talk about that. What do you, I guess in some ways it's kind of self-explanatory. Well, we need to have a most important number, Lee. What do you mean by that? What does that look like? And then perhaps how do we find it?
Yeah. So this concept of the MIND methodology, which stands for most important number and drivers, and that's right out of my book, Your Most Important Number, that you mentioned. Thank you. And it's an operating methodology to continually and responsibly increase the value of any organization. In the for-profit world, what's the one number for the entire organization that represents the value of it and will drive the majority of the right behaviors? So if it's for profit, it's going to be some version of profit or cash flow that happens to be capital intensive. For example, if in your industry, a typical way of valuing your organization is a multiple of EBITDA, then great. Then that would be your most important number. And then everything else is subordinate to it. Culture, everything would be in there. And then the way this MIND methodology works is you have a most important number at the top of the organization, and then every function, department, team will have their own most important number that does those two things. It's representative of the value that team was designed to create, and it drives the majority of the right behaviors. And then you can cascade that out as far as you want, whether you've got one team, 10 teams, hundreds of teams, or thousands of teams. Now you're at this place where you can see instantly whether they're winning or losing, with their most important number. Where did they start? Where are they going? Where are they at any point in time? And then the next question is, what's the best work you're doing to achieve your most important number goal? Now, they'll all be measuring other things. There could be 5 things, 20 things, whatever it is. But the rule in this methodology is that you're only measuring it if it helps you make better decisions to increase the value your team creates, i.e., your most important number. And then drivers are categories of work that are going to be unique to each team, that are evergreen, and they should be continually improving how they leverage those categories of work to improve their most important number. So I think a big part of doing your job is continuous improvement. And you talk about that in your book as well. I think this is such an easy, simple, elegant way to run at it. And what I've found, Kevin, and I'd love your take on this too, is I've never seen traditional goal setting stand the test of time. It looks good on paper. Like everybody's got their goals, set your goal, 3 goals a quarter, get it approved by your manager, rinse and repeat. When I audit goals inside organizations, with 0 exceptions so far, 90+% of them are just not very thoughtful. Again, it looks good on paper. Let's get full goal alignment all the way down. But usually the companies successful at doing that have made it almost a most important number system. Like, this is the number that matters, not all the goals the individual employees set, and either happens or it doesn't. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth there. And I think that, as you described it and sort of waving your arms and saying all these things that have to happen, especially if it's a big organization, is that exercise becomes the outcome, which is the biggest problem with it, right? So like, now that we've set the goals, like we feel like we've done something, we really haven't. We've only set the table for something, but because we feel like we've now done something, then nothing happens for 9 months if it's an annual goal, or for 2.5 months if it's a quarterly goal. And so I think you're exactly right. So I'd like us to talk a little bit more about the drivers. So most important number, MIND, drivers. So how I'm a leader in the middle of an organization. Right?
Okay.
I'm not the CEO. I'm not the founder. I'm not you or me. I'm a leader in the middle of an organization. How do I identify? And let's say that I have my most important number, or because this might be new to me today, I have a clue about where I want that to be. Give me some advice about setting those drivers, and give me some examples of what they might be.
Well, foundationally, we should start with the most important number and how to design it. And one of the examples I talk about in the book, which is one just about everybody will understand and get, is a most important number for HR. And when I start working with HR leaders, and these can be smaller companies or large companies with thousands of employees, and we'll start the conversation because the team should come up with the most important number that they're going to be rallying around, if you will. So with that, what would the most important number be for HR? And they always start with, well, it's got to be retention or engagement. So, okay, now remember, a most important number has to also drive the majority of the right behavior. So let's play with these scenarios, and let's make it retention. And you hire me to run HR. We're 3 years down the road. I kept 97% of everybody. Retention off the charts. Nobody's ever done this. Never mind that 60% of the people can't do what we hired them to do. We kept them. So I did not drive the majority of the right behaviors. A better, most important number for HR would be percentage of seats filled with capable people. And then how do you define that? Well, here's a clearly defined role, 2 to 4 measurable outcomes that person fitting, in that role will be responsible for achieving, and a list of capabilities that they need to have a shot at actually achieving those outcomes. So anybody that's meeting or overdriving outcomes is capable. Anybody under that, they're not in that particular seat. And the value of that to the organization goes higher and higher as you climb the food chain to the top, right? So that now we're driving the right behaviors. We're recruiting better, we're onboarding better, we're training better, we're giving leaders better tools, and all of it. Go right down the line. Go to finance. What would their most important number be? I think generally it should be cash flow. And when I rate how they're doing, let's dig into a couple of drivers. So we want to get all the right information out in a timely way, and it's got to be accurate. So that would be a driver. It's their machine for operationalizing, doing that really well. Now, a lot of these finance leaders, they'll put together amazing reports. I'll go in and work with a client, and I'll see, wow, it took me 4 hours to go through all this monthly reporting you put out, but it's amazing, and I'm good at connecting dots. And here's what I would do with it. Then I go to the senior leadership team and I ask, how are you using this information coming out of finance to help you make better decisions to increase the value of the organization? And over 90% of the time, I get nothing. Like, I see what we did. This is what's left over. I'm doing my job. So there has to be a driver in there for education, but not in the sense of here's how you read an income statement or a detailed trial balance. It's got to be helping leaders at every level in the organization discover the 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 numbers that are most impactful to them that they can use to make decisions to increase cash flow in the organization. So we're discovering it together and educating them on how to play this great game of business, if you will. So that's how you start thinking about drivers. What are the categories of work that are evergreen? There's no end to how well you can do it that you want to leverage in there. And every team's going to be different. So first and foremost, collaborating what that number is, and then come up with those evergreen categories of work. And we can get into how to put in strategic initiatives, if you will, if you want to talk about that as well. Does that answer your question, Kevin?
Yeah, we can. But I'm going to go back to what you're just saying about the wonderful, beautiful, fabulous report, right? And so along with what you've just said, right? If the C-suite or the consumer of the customer of that report doesn't have a good way to use it or to consume it or to use it to solve their problems, then it isn't so beautiful in and of itself, right? So there's all of the piece you talked about part of my role, if I'm in finance, is to help other people use that. But I got to make sure that I'm delivering what they really need too. And so that what you've described, that ongoing conversation, I think is critical to the whole piece. So talk about, as you just said, a little bit more about the strategic initiative piece and how that would connect, because people are listening to this and saying, Lee, this makes a lot of sense. And I'm talking with Lee Benson, the author of Your Most Important Number. I'm going to make sure you get a copy, and we'll tell you how to do that before we're done. But a lot of people are hearing this and saying, I got to see how I can start to incorporate some of this stuff in with what I'm already doing. And they're thinking about strategic initiatives. So how does that fit into this, Lee?
Yeah. It's super important. Let me get to one more foundational thing as I'm listening to you kind of describe this that I think would be helpful. Philosophically, the CEO's job, in my opinion, is to continually and responsibly increase the value of their organization. That's their job. All right. So by proxy, everybody on the senior leadership team, that's their collective job to be able to do that. Now, when you look at every leader in the organization, they should have a really good answer to, hey, how do you create value for this organization? And if they give you a job description, you missed a big opportunity. But if they say, well, here's how I create value. This is my team's most important number. This is why we selected it, why it drives the majority of the right behaviors. And this is the best work that we're doing to improve it. And here's my team. These are all the roles, the outcomes they're responsible for. I got it. That's incredible, right? So I think it's fair that we expect, and we should design, especially as CEOs of our organizations, the roles for all the leaders, so they're so clear on how we create value and how to describe that. And if I'm a non-supervisory team member and they ask me the question, well, hey, how do you create value for the organization? Well, I'm on this team. Kevin leads it. This is our most important number. Here's where we're at. We're a little bit ahead of plan at this point. We're halfway through the year. This is my role. These are my 2 outcomes I'm responsible for. The best work that I'm doing to help my team create more value for the organization. When we improve our most important number, it improves the next one up all the way to the top and accretes to more value as an organization. Everything's better, from job security, surviving recessions, all that kind of stuff. So that Kevin, is I think what we're looking for, that people are really clear on that. And so part of doing the job would be everybody's improving all the time. You're constantly doing that. That's just part of your job on top of your role. Now we want to make step changes in our results. And so we have planning or strategy sessions. And my definition of a strategic initiative would be anything new or different enough that would cause, once we put it in place, activate it, et cetera, to create a step change in our results. And when I get strategic planning decks from clients, when I go into work with them, especially the bigger ones, last year, one small, big one, around $1 billion, one at $60 billion. And I see over 100 strategic initiatives. It's like, okay, well, that's
Here's how
interesting.
many they got. 0. They got 0. They got 100, right?
Well, yes. And for so many reasons, you're completely right on there. So I scour through it and I come back and say, okay, I've looked at it. And in all our initial discussions, there's literally only, even the biggest one I worked with last year, a $60 billion market cap, there were 4 things that created over 80% of the value for the entire organization. And I said, out of these 100 plus strategic initiatives, here's about 20 that fit into those 4 categories, and they're new and different things. All the rest of them are going in the category of please do your job. So great, let's for sure do that. Now let's look at the committees and people responsible for these strategic initiatives. So you've got your most important number, you've got your drivers, but there's going to be things that you want to put in place, get done, that have sort of a finish date or an implementation date that you expect to get a return on. That's another list that you go through. And I always like racking and stacking that stuff by return on investment or ROI analysis. And that's going to be different for every company. How long will it take, resources to do it, et cetera. But what we're trying for here is full alignment on everything we can do to continually increase our most important number, and then make the best decisions on doing the right work at the right time in the right order. And I'm thinking about best net return 2 to 3 years out. And again, every organization is going to be different. I can make a little more now, but a lot less, and net 2 years out. So I'm always weighing that. And then the third part of this is a culture of accountability. So when we all say we're going to do something, what percentage of the time do we actually do it in there?
Yeah, which takes us back to right where you started about why the most important number helps us be clear about the behaviors, right?
Yeah.
So we've talked, we dove into the most important number. We talked about drivers. We've been really focused there on this part of your process.
Yeah.
But there's something in front of that. It's the first chapter in the book. I think anyone, if they stop and think about it, there's something else in front of this: mission, vision, values, those kinds of things. And lots of people talk about those things, and there's a lot of really useful things. You got a lot of great stuff in the book. But there's something in the book that you described that I thought was really good and really clever. And I'm going to just read a sentence or two and then just have you respond to it. Okay. So you're talking about creating values, not value creation, but the creation of the organizational values. You say, to create this new set of values, we surveyed all employees, asking them to write down the observable behaviors of the best performing people they'd ever worked with on their best days. And you use that to coalesce and to come up with organizational values. Just talk about that. How did you come to that? Maybe any insights? I'm sure you used it more than just in the example at Able Aerospace. Talk about that for a sec.
Yeah, I've gone through this exercise a number of times. We created, going in the Wayback Machine, so 98-ish, 97, 98, we created a list of values and other alignment tools, a mission and a vision and that kind of stuff. Why? Well, that's what companies do. Okay, so we're doing this because that's what companies do. Wrong reason to do anything. And we got the mission right enough, but we did tweak it. And what I realized when we put the values out there, and the top value was integrity, and we had it on posters all over the facility. At the time, I think it was probably 99-ish, I asked 10 of our 70 employees, how are you applying integrity to make the organization measurably better? And I got 10 really crazy answers that told me, wow, we've wasted a lot of time here. We've got a lot of expensive wallpaper. And then I thought about it for 2 seconds. I said, well, gosh, everything we do should be done at least with the intent of making the organization measurably better. Everything else is a waste of time and resources. So what are we trying to accomplish with this? And our alignment tools should pass that test. So I wanted to create the conditions where at any point in time, 90% of our employees, or 50% plus for sure of our employees, are behaving, leading, and performing better than the top 10% at our strongest, most admired competitors. That's what we want. So how can we give everybody sort of a guide to what that would look like? And that's when I went out and said, hey, I need your help. We're going to get rid of values completely, and we're going to go into behaviors because it's more observable, measurable, et cetera. And we had 68 of our team members respond to the survey. I remember because it was such a high percentage. And there was a huge list, but it all distilled down to 6 that stood the test of time. And the first one that kind of goes to integrity was high performing team members throughout Able Engineering at that time do what they say they will. It's observable, right? Or they're fully engaged and participate within the team. They present and pursue permanent solutions as opposed to dwelling on problems. They're respectful, honest, and straightforward. They treat company resources as their own. I'll remember these along with the leadership traits and the vision and the mission and the quality policy as long as I'm here walking the earth, because every 6 months, every employee came up with one example of how they applied each of the alignment tools to make the organization measurably better. And they would even take a shot at the ROI. Well, how did it improve customer experience, internal or external? How did it improve profitability or cash flow? And when they write that stuff down, even when it's completely off base, remarkable, right? We know that. We know right where to start developing them. This is incredible. And like your guest Vikram recently on this show, you develop everybody all the time. They're on the bus. You develop them. In there. And that was always my philosophy. If they're here, we're developing it. We make a choice to do something else, and let's help them on their journey to a different or better culture for them. So that's how we thought about it. And these can't be marketing slogans. They can't be wallpaper. It has to be something we can sink our teeth into. And most importantly, for the folks listening in here, have a reason for doing it before you even develop it. For example, our mission statement, to kind of close this out, I wanted to tell our customers in a compelling way why they should do business with us, and tell every employee why they get a paycheck. Because if we don't do this well every day, we don't get paychecks. Right?
To me, that's the dual purpose and the dual test of your mission, right? If those two things are, if it's compelling and attractive to customers and clarifying and meaningful for your team, then you've really got something. It may not be the one that you need or want ultimately, but if you got those two things, you got something powerful and useful. Yeah. I want to shift gears before we finish, Lee. I've got just a couple other things for us before we finish. I always ask this question, and I don't always know the answer, but in this case, I think I do, or at least I have a pretty good guess. So the question is, what do you do for fun? I think it's behind you.
Well, I'm in my music studio. I have a newly recently formed sort of band here, and we're halfway through recording for an album, having a lot of fun with that. And I love to exercise, go out hiking virtually every day, listen to books.
Awesome. Well, since we're talking about books, and in the longer bio that you sent me that was more than I shared with everybody earlier, you'd mentioned as well that you like to read. What's something you're reading now or that you've read recently?
So Laura Dodsworth wrote a book called Free Your Mind, and really interesting. Like the most powerful line out of that book, and I'm just finishing it up right now: control your mind or somebody else will. And I like that. And there's a lot of sort of antidotes in there, or skills or tactics to make sure that you keep control of your critical thinking and where you want to go, and have the right filters. And for example, my filter is value creation. Will this create value in the world? Yes or no? Holistic value in all 3 categories.
I love that. Before we go, the question you've most wanted me to ask, I suppose, probably is, how can we learn more about your work? We've been talking about the book, which is at the core of much of your work, but where can we learn more about the work? Where do you want to point people? How can people reach you? What do you want to say?
Yeah, please go to our website, which is etw.com. You can find the book, Your Most Important Number, there, or in any one of 40,000 channels. That's about operationalizing value creation in organizations. And there's another book I wrote called Value Creation Kid, The Healthy Struggles Your Children Need to Succeed. And that's about operationalizing value creation within the family. So excited about that.
Awesome. So thank you for that. And again, everybody, etw.com. We'll have links to those things in the show notes as always. Before we finish, everyone, though, I have a question for all of you who are listening. whether it's live or whether it's later. And that is the question I ask you every single week, which is now what? What action are you going to take as a result of this conversation? I'm confident that you have some new ways to think about value creation. Maybe the idea that you most want to take action on is the idea of holistic value creation. Maybe you have some new thoughts about how you ought to be filtering and considering your strategic initiatives. Maybe you are reframing how you think about some of the work. Whatever it might be, my hope is that you don't just sort of soak this in, but rather you take action. Because unless you take action on what we got, no new value, to use Lee's words, will be created. So I hope that you will do that. And Lee, thanks again for being here. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Kevin. I enjoyed this conversation.
And everybody, if you enjoyed it, then tell somebody else. And if this is your first time, make sure you subscribe wherever it is that you get your podcasts so you don't miss next week's, because there's always a next week and there's always a next episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.